everybody. Welcome to the session about student accessibility services. My name is Mary Christine Bird. I also go by MC. I'm the Director of Student Accessibility Services here at William and Mary, and I'm excited to speak to you all today a little bit about what our office does and how we can support your student. So quickly, I just want to introduce you to our team. As I said, my name is Mary Christine. I'm on the screen here. I'm the Director of Student Accessibility Services. Next to me, we have Allison Stovall. She's our Assistant Director. Both me and Allison will be the individuals that will be meeting with your students regarding accommodations and determining accommodations. Next, we have Arena Scott. She's our Assistant Director of Testing, and she handles all testing related matters. So, when I say testing, that means students who are approved for testing accommodations. We do have a testing center here in our office where students who are approved for testing accommodations can come in and take their exams. I'll be talking a little bit more about our testing center as we progress through this presentation. And finally, we have Alyssa Owens. She's our administrative coordinator. Alyssa sits at our front desk and answers the phone, answers emails, and she's likely the first face that you'll see when you come into our office. And she's very welcoming and can answer a lot of questions and direct you to the right individual. We do have some other individuals who work in our office that are not on here. For instance, we do have some graduate students who support our assistant director of testing, as well as myself and Allison. We have professional proctors who are proctors for our testing center. So again, their names are not on here, but we do have other staff in here. But us four are the main individuals in the office that you might see on a more regular basis, or your student will see on a more regular basis. So a little bit about what we do. So we provide reasonable accommodations for students with disabilities. So we provide accommodations for students with all types of disabilities. So it could be a visible disability, such as a physical disability, or it could be an invisible disability. We provide accommodations to ensure that all students have equal access to all aspects of campus life, specifically students with disabilities. This can also include students who have temporary disabilities. We hope that this never happens, but students who, break a limb or get a concussion, we can provide accommodations for those types of temporary disabilities. It doesn't just have to be a permanent disability. Some common types of disabilities that we approve, accommodations for students are ADHD, any mental health diagnoses such as anxiety, depression, um, and the list can be, ongoing. Students who are on the autism spectrum, students with visual impairments, and students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Um, we offer resources and advocacy for students. So our office is under the umbrella of student success. We work really closely with our colleagues in the offices of academic well-being and care support services. So we often refer our students to either of those offices depending on what type of support and resources that they might need. We can also direct them to other places on campus, not necessarily just within student success. We could connect them with, say, for instance, the counseling center or the wellness center, academic advising, who we also work closely with, Res Life. So, and the list can go on, but we do want to make sure that when your student does come in, if they have questions that may not relate to an accommodation, we can direct them to the right place so that they're not being, thrown around from one office to the next. So we really want to help students connect and make sure that they can, get all the resources or access all the resources that, are available to them here on campus that they might need. Um, as I said earlier on in my presentation, we do have a testing center here for students with approved testing accommodations. So some of those accommodations could look like extra time on exams or a reduced distraction test setting. I will be showing you a photo in our next slide about what our center looks like. So we do have 22 spaces for students to take exams in there. We also have two soundproof booths for students who are approved for accommodations where they need a more private test setting. So there won't always be 22 students in there at a time. There'll be different tests being proctored at a time in that testing space, but we strive to keep the environment, reduced to have reduced distractions so that, there's minimal noise. Our proctors are really good at making sure that students aren't interrupting other students. Um, so again, we really strive to keep the environment free of any type of like distraction that may be presented in the classroom and um, other areas of campus where students, might be able to take exams. So here you'll see just a very small photo of what our testing center looks like. We encourage your student to stop by before, classes start or before classes even start, before they have exams to check out our center, just to kind of get a general idea of where they would be testing. So there are a couple different areas of accommodations in regard to like what we approve for students. So the first being academic accommodations, and I would say that's like the most common accommodation that we approve for students. So again, kind of going back to exam accommodations. Excuse me. Like I said in the previous slides, these could be exam accommodations, so extra time on exams, a reduced distraction testing space, a private testing space, whatever the student might need. Um, all accommodations are determined like on a case by case basis. So not all students with the same disability will necessarily be approved for the same accommodation. Some students might have multiple disabilities. So everything is really determined on a case by case basis in regard to even like the amount of extra time that a student receives. Um, but I would say extra time on exams is probably one of the most common academic accommodations that we approve for students. Um, we also provide note-taking support. We offer something to students who are approved for this accommodation, um, something called Genio. Essentially, it's a program where students would get access to it through email, and then they would click on that link and they would be allowed to have like their classes recorded, and that recording would transcribe what is being recorded so that the student can go back and look at that recording later on, and access it to study for exams or just to review any content that has been presented in the classroom. The next thing is like flexibility. So when I say flexibility, that can mean flexibility with attendance or assignments. This is typically approved for students who have disabilities where they have flare-ups or some disability in which things are episodic. So it's not something designed for students who necessarily just have ADHD. It's more designed for students who have mental health diagnoses or specific chronic conditions where at times they're not going to be able to get assignments in or make it to class. And with that accommodation, they do need to communicate with their professors on when they're going to be in class and when they're not going to be in class. This is not an exhaustive list of academic accommodations that we provide. We provide several, other accommodations. But again, that's determined on a case by case basis. And in my next slides, I'm going to get into a little bit more about our process and what next steps are and how things are decided in terms of accommodations. The next area of accommodation is another pretty common one, which would be a housing accommodation. So some housing accommodations that are common are single rooms, specific bathroom types, and air conditioning. Again, that is not an exhaustive list of housing accommodations, but those are some of the common accommodations that we might approve for students with disabilities, and that could be for various different disabilities. We see a lot of students requesting accommodations for chronic conditions, physical disabilities, mental health diagnoses, autism. So there's a variety and there's not one specific disability that just, supports the need for a housing accommodation. So we also offer parking and transportation accommodations. The main one is the limited mobility shuttle service, so the LMSS. The LMSS is designed to help students with mobility challenges get around campus so that they can get to their classes on a daily basis. The mobility shuttle service or the limited mobility shuttle service only unfortunately runs till 5 p.m. each day, but it is helpful for students, to get to their classes that are during the day. Um, And we all also offer some other types of parking and transportation accommodations, which we encourage students to reach out to us and we can talk to them a little bit about that. Um, Underclassmen students are not allowed to have cars on campus, but if there is a need related to a disability where a student does need to have a car on campus as an underclassman, that's something we can review and consider a student for as an accommodation. And finally, we do offer like dining accommodations. So this can be a meal plan adjustment, or if a student needs to be completely off the meal plan. Again, we would discuss this with the student and then we would determine, which meal plan, whether it's an adjustment or a waiver is appropriate for the student. So, how can your student get started with us? So, every student has access to an Accommodate portal. So, the first thing your student would need to do is register with our office. I know I've probably met with several of your students already, but if I have not already, this is the first step in regard to getting started with this whole process. So, they would register online through this Accommodate portal. Through this portal, they're going to be prompted with questions on what they're requesting, whether they've had accommodations in the past, what's worked for them, what hasn't, again, like what they're requesting, what their disability is, what they think they might need, and anything like any questions that they have for us. So it should take them roughly about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, I would say. Could take longer, it could take less time, just really dependent on what, the student is requesting and how long it takes them to fill out the form. Um, Students will also be asked to submit documentation to support whatever it is that they're requesting. So we will require that a student submits some type of documentation. So that can mean anything from like an evaluation that a student's had done. If it's for academic accommodations, we also have forms on our website that kind of correlate to the specific accommodations that students are requesting. So on our website, there's something called the academic addendum. That's for students who are requesting academic accommodations. There's a housing addendum, and that's for students who are requesting housing accommodations. There's a meal plan addendum and a parking addendum. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the types of accommodation that a student's requesting. If they're requesting housing and academic, we'll then request both of those forms. However, if a student's had an evaluation done and they're just looking for academic accommodations, they might not need to submit any of those forms. We're always happy to answer any questions about what types of forms that we would need, and just to ensure that, the documentation is correct. And the final step to kind of getting started with this whole process is to schedule something called a welcome meeting. Um, so a welcome meeting really is just like an interactive conversation with the student and an SAS staff member to discuss like the background of the disability, what the needs are, so what accommodations are being requested, and what accommodations will help, support the student or has helped support the student in the past. Like I said earlier, all decisions are on a case-by-case basis. And we want this conversation to be a positive one. We're really, as it says in a welcome meeting, we want to be there to, especially as first year students, we want to be there to welcome them, really make them feel comfortable with coming to ask us questions, come in when they do have a concern or a challenge. We just really, want to get to know them a little bit better and make sure that they feel comfortable coming back and talking to us. So how can you as parents support your students? So really, Student Accessibility Services strives to foster student independence and really encourage self-determination. So now this is like kind of like the time to do that. When they're coming to college, I know in high school, a lot of parents do really advocate for their student, but I think this is a good time for students to practice their, you know, self their independence and really build those self-advocacy skills that they're not going to only need like while they're here at school, but also, when they graduate and in the workforce. So it's really a good time to kind of encourage them to be, strong like self-advocates. And even if it's just something as much as like so that they know how to talk about their disability and how it impacts them in whatever setting that they're impacted in. So whether it's an academic setting, so really helping them like have those like conversations with others so that they feel comfortable talking about it and being able to come back in and talk to us later if there is a need and really explaining like, their disability and how it's impacting them. So again, we help students develop self-advocacy skills through like our coordination of accommodations and services. During our welcome meetings, we're going to be asking the students questions. So we're really going to be directing those questions to the student. I know many parents do participate in those welcome meetings, and that's fine as long as your student wants you in those meetings if you participate. But we're really going to be directing the questions to the student and asking them to describe, what their experience has been and what they think they might need. So that's really a huge way to kind of get everything like started and having them start to, advocate for themselves. So we really, really want to help them develop those skills. So again, we encourage you as parents to empower your students to take the lead in communicating like with our office, rather than you reaching out and asking those questions. Again, you're able to be present in those meetings if your student is fine with that. But we really want to empower our students. Um, so my last slide is just our contact information with our email and where we're located. So we're located in the Sadler Center in Suite 181. Our email address is sas@wm.edu. We also have an Instagram where we encourage our students to follow us so that they kind of learn what we're doing, what events are going on, just other things that student success, does to support our students. And just we also have our webpage on there where there's more resources and just more information about the documentation that needs to be submitted, how a student could submit a request for accommodations, etc. Will get into a little bit more right now, just about once a student meets with us, we will then determine which accommodations we're going to approve the student for. Um, and then again, like I keep saying, that's determined on a case-by-case basis. And we'll really take our conversation with your student into consideration in making those determinations, as well as the documentation. But we really want to take like the conversation we're having into consideration in terms of like what we're approving. Students at any point too in their time here can request additional accommodations. So if they get started and find that they need something additional, they can always come back to us, and we're happy to talk about what might be appropriate at that time. So once a student is approved for their accommodation, what we will do is we are going to send them an email to their William and Mary email, letting them know what they've been approved for. And in that email, there will be instructions on how to do something called activate your accommodations. So this is specifically for students who are approved for academic accommodations. Activating is essentially giving us permission to email their professors to let them know what they've been approved for. Students will need to do this at the beginning of each semester. I would say once they know that they're not going to add or drop any more classes, so that we can then send the letters out to their professors so their professors are aware of, for example, they have extra time on exams or they have access to Genio, whatever the accommodation might be, so that the professors are aware. After we send the letter, or when we send the letters to the professors, we will be saying in the letter that, if they have any questions about the accommodations, they can contact us. We do encourage students to have a conversation with their professors regarding their accommodations. It's not required, but we do encourage it. It's another thing where they can kind of start building their self-advocacy skills. But if professors have questions about the accommodations and how to implement them, they are always able to reach out to us, and we're happy to answer any questions the professors have to ensure that they are implemented correctly for the student. At any point during their time here, students have any concerns related to their accommodations or anything related to disability, we're the place to go, and we're happy to help them. And if we can't help them, like I said, we will direct them to the appropriate resource. For other accommodations, we will send approved accommodation letters to the appropriate offices. So if your student's approved for housing accommodation, we'll email the student and residence life will be copied on that so that they can make those arrangements. And then also, if your student's approved for any transportation or dining accommodations, those will also be sent to the appropriate offices. Again, on this last slide is our contact information. So if anything that wasn't covered in here and you have further questions, we encourage you to reach out to our office and we're happy to answer any questions. We also encourage you to stop by while you're here or anytime you're in the area if you would like to see our space. I appreciate all of your time. And again, feel free to stop by, encourage your students to stop by, and we look forward to working with them. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you for your time again. Bye bye.